The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I'm Erica Lukes, and you're listening to UFO Classified on KCOR Digital Broadcasting Network. I am incredibly excited about sharing this interview with you tonight. I recorded the interview yesterday to accommodate my guest schedule, so we won't be taking questions in the chat room, but please get in there. I will be in chat all night. I would like to give a big thanks to NARCAP's Executive Director Ted Rowe for helping me arrange the interview with Dr. Richard Haynes. Dr. Haynes has not done many interviews as of late, so this is a very special evening, and I hope you learn a lot about NARCAP and the importance that it plays in investigating and researching the UFO phenomenon. I want to tell you a little bit about NARCAP for those of you who don't understand or have never heard of the organization. The National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena, or NARCAP, is dedicated to the documentation and analysis of aviation safety-related encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP. NARCAP science advisors represent a cross-section of disciplines from geophysicists and research psychologists to meteorologists and astrophysicists. Their body of work is incredible, and I would encourage you to go to narcap.org to find out more and to read the technical reports presented here. You will find names like Dr. Jacques Vallée, Massimo Teodorani, among many others. It is an exceptional site and organization. If you visit the NARCAP website, you will also find a free ebook by my guest this evening, Dr. Richard Haynes, entitled UFO Phenomena and the Behavioral Scientist. NARCAP relies on donations. It is incredibly hard, as all of you know, to obtain funding, and most of us do this as a labor of love. So I would encourage you, if you are going to donate your hard-earned money, to donate that to an organization like NARCAP. The NARCAP team has been involved in several high-profile cases, one specifically where Dr. Haynes was the only person to actually interview the pilot, was the Japan Airlines Flight 1628. That UFO incident, which most of you have probably heard about, took place on November 17, 1986, and it was a Japanese Boeing 747 that was en route from Paris to the Narita International Airport just outside of Tokyo. Not only was this sighting important for many reasons, but the aftermath was important as well. So please make sure you look at this case and find out more about it. And now let me tell you about my guest this evening. Dr. Richard Haynes is a retired NASA research scientist and former chief of the Space Humans Factor Office at Ames Research Center. He was the assistant professor of psychology at San Jose State University before he moved to the Research Institute for Advanced Computer Science as senior research scientist, where he conducted research R&D on multimedia telecommunications for NASA's International Space Station. Dr. Haynes is authored several books, including CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, Observing UFOs, which is one of my favorites, Project Delta, and his newest book, Sudden Loss, which is a fictional account that he will talk about later, as well as a couple of his other books. Dr. Haynes is someone who has tremendous courage, resolve, and has contributed immensely to UAP research. I am thrilled to have him on the show tonight. Dr. Haynes, welcome and thank you.
Well, Erica, thank you for these kind comments, and I hope I can live up to them.
Oh, I know you can. I've read everything that you've done. In fact, I'm sitting here with Project Delta, a study of multiple UFO and observing UFOs on my desk.
Oh, yes.
And both of these, I will say, observing UFOs has been my Bible for investigations, and it's incredibly important. And it's out of print, so it was a bit to find, but I did find it on Amazon, and I'm so happy I have it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad that you're finding something useful in it.
I am. So what got you into this? How did you become convinced that this is something that you needed to dedicate your time to?
Well, that's a great question. It all began back in the mid-1960s when I was just getting started as a research scientist at NASA in California. And one of my first jobs there was to develop a laboratory in which I could simulate the way objects look to the astronauts in space, part of the Gemini program, a two-man capsule. And during that project, it involved a surgical clean room and a solar simulator and a lot of fancy optical equipment, I discovered that I could control the optical characteristics of targets, let's call them, objects you look at, in such a way that the observer could not accurately determine what they were, their size, their shape, their color, their distance, that these were all controllable. And so, as a skeptic on this subject, I set out to disprove what you and I would call UFOs. By the way, I don't use UFO anymore. I much prefer UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that. I would love to ask you that because I know that you and Ted coined that term, and there's a very significant meaning behind it as well. A good story.
Yes, well, that's a whole other subject, but nonetheless, I set out to disprove everything could be optical illusions, for instance, And during the course of that work, over, I would say, a 5-year period, I began to meet pilots and interview them on this subject off the record and certainly not part of my work, but just as a hobby, like on the weekends and forever and so forth. And I discovered that they were telling me things that were so unbelievable that would jeopardize their career. And I said, gee, what you're describing to me, I cannot duplicate in the laboratory. This was not an optical illusion. This is something totally different. And that got me on then to from a science point of view, keeping an open mind and letting the data speak for itself, to adopt a more open-minded position on this subject and let the data speak for itself, which I've been trying to do ever since. So I haven't taken a position, as I think many of my colleagues would agree that once you do take a position, you find yourself at one end of the spectrum, either a true believer and believing in ET and so forth, or a total skeptic at the other end. And I like to think that the middle position is not only more flexible, but I think more realistic in terms of what really may be going on here.
And that's an important thing. And I think sometimes we do quickly, once you have a sighting, especially, you go into this zeal of this true believer. And I think then sometimes people have a tendency to believe things or be led down a path that isn't necessarily truthful or right or good for them.
Yeah, I think you're right. Now, I have to tell you that I've said before to other people that I've never seen anything myself that I couldn't identify. And so I'm not an experiencer. And so that perhaps gives me a bit of neutrality and objectivity that other people may not have. And it gives me a flexibility, again, as a scientist, to keep that door open to going in either direction, you see.
Mm-hmm.
I think in science, that's really an important thing to do.
It is. And you know, I'm coming from, I mean, obviously I'm not a scientist. I'm a business owner and an artist, but so the science thing is something I've been learning, and I want to do this in the best way I can, which is a scientific approach as far as my research. But, you know, I will say that some investigators or researchers seem to come into this with a bias, which is not scientific at all. And how do we encourage people to work without a bias?
That's a great question. That's a fundamental question. And let me propose a hypothesis to you, or at least an idea, that encounters with UAP, either close or far away, doesn't matter, is acting almost like an initiation. That it's certainly not voluntary on most people's parts. They don't go out seeking them. Sometimes they do. But nonetheless, the experience is very deep-seated, I think. That's what I've come to see. Very emotional, very powerful. And it's almost as if the experiencer is becoming initiated into something. Well, the question then is, if this is a useful metaphor, what are they being initiated into? Is it like the Greek mysteries of the past that were human-oriented, human-developed? Or is it something far beyond that, being initiated into a much larger view of life and philosophy and so forth? So I just offer that as a possible metaphor that may be useful for some people.
That's brilliant. And you have a lot of useful things to say about witnesses when they first observe UFOs, in observing UFOs. And I think it is interesting because you were talking about how one person can see something standing next to another, and yet they have completely different ways of viewing the object and then compartmentalizing or dealing with it after the fact. You know, some people just completely shut down and then try to rationalize their sighting.
Yes. Well, yes, you're right. And from an experimental psychology point of view, which deals with these very interpersonal, private information processes, I think that we could view kind of along a continuum of entertainment versus education. And some people who have an experience with this strange phenomenon will look at it as an entertainment, while others, because of their personality perhaps, will view it as education. And so there's an individual difference, which I think is really very important, where they fall along that spectrum, that continuum. I personally view it kind of in the middle again. I enjoy it. I've learned a lot and met a lot of nice people over the decades. But at the same time, I'm learning a great deal as well and trying to continue to integrate the finer points that may turn out to be very important.
I bet you have some wonderful experiences that you've had with people through the years. I mean, I can't believe, in fact, I ordered Project Identification the other day, and I'm reading that in another out-of-print book, which is fantastic. But there are references to you in there and your work. I mean, it's just in any good research, your name is mentioned.
Well, that's nice to hear. Yes, I have been fortunate to speak with a lot of very credible people over the decades now, and I'm continuing to try to find what they have in common from a psychological point of view. Are they being pre-selected, for instance, for the experience, as opposed to just happening to be in the right place at the right time on a random basis? I'm looking for common elements in the phenomenon itself, which of course is a very interesting and challenging objective, as I'm sure you'd know as being an investigator yourself. And so over the years, I'm challenged to keep my mind open and not shut it towards the larger picture here, which may be ET. I certainly leave that door open. But on the other hand, what if, well, let me go back to a theory I proposed a long time ago. I never published it, but I will tell you about it for the first time here and during this interview.
Oh, wonderful.
I call it photic bacteria. And I propose the following, that what if the intelligence at some great distance away is able to send a photic, you know what photic is, photons, light, basically, a photic beam towards Earth, and that if a human being, let's say outdoors at night, looks up and happens to see this and capture it, it enters the pupil of the eye, it falls upon the retina, it is then transferred into the brain in neurological signal of some kind, and in fact that turns out to be a virus, a foreign body, if you will, that is now infecting the nervous system and causing something to grow, perhaps an experience or an emotion or a hallucination or a memory or a dream, some altered state of consciousness within the viewer, okay? And so I call that photic bacteria, for want of a different word, or a better word, I should say. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. It does. And that is absolutely fascinating. Will you publish this?
No, I don't think so. It's too far out. I don't think anybody would take it seriously or me seriously. I'll just give you a very brief background on where I came up with that idea. And it was during some research with abductees in California when we were still living there. And many of them told me that pretty much the same thing, independently, of course, that they heard a noise or they saw something out of the corner of their eye, usually through a window at night from their home, out in the backyard or field or something, and that they turned and looked at that light that was apparently there, and then the events that subsequently took place were triggered. Somehow it took place because they looked directly at that light. Now, I kind of built upon that observation of quite a number of people, actually, and came up with the idea, well, the light source doesn't have to be in your backyard. It can be in outer space. It can be a long ways away. And so all we need is what I call an orienting reflex, where the viewer has to somehow direct his vision in the direction of the light, and after that, the photic bacteria is entering the nervous system.
To me, I really feel that you need to publish this. Even if people you think wouldn't take you seriously now, just think of how important that could be in the future. I mean, this could very well be the case.
Well, maybe. Maybe it might also generate a whole lot of phobias and fears People not I want to go outdoors at night.
Oh, that wouldn't do it. I'd still want to go outdoors because it's so beautiful to look up. I'd take my chances, but and it's funny because I think that we could just turn on the news and we could be, we could generate so much fear and phobia and negativity, and I think that I think that would be really wonderful and important. So I'm very happy that you shared that here. Thank you. Well, that concludes a very exciting first portion of UFO Classified right here on KCOR Digital Broadcasting Network. What a great interview so far, and there is much, much more to come. It is an exciting opportunity for you to listen to one of the world's foremost UAP researchers. Thanks for joining me tonight. Make sure you stick around for the Ladies' Night on KCOR. And after my show, you'll have Universal Child with Joanna Roth, Restricted Airspace with Tina Marie, my fabulous producer, and Hyperspace with Solaris Blue Raven. So we've got great shows coming up after my show. I'd like to take a moment to say, please visit narcap.org to look at the technical reports, international reports, and to hopefully make a contribution. I can't stress enough how important it is to put money towards organizations like this who are really getting in there and doing wonderful work, not only in the United States, but also in other countries where they're building alliances. This is critical. They also are very much about sharing the information, and I respect that tremendously. As a field investigator, a researcher, I find it very important to get on here and look at what they have as far as technical reports. Project Sphere, as I will talk about a little bit later, is one of the most important technical reports that I have to look at with regard to the orb fireball phenomena. So get involved and see the list of people that are involved, and that will tell you right there the caliber of the organization. We are going to take a quick break, and then we will be back here with UFO Classified. Make sure you like me on Facebook.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio Contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back. I'm Erica Lukes, and this is UFO Classified. I'm here with NARCAP's chief scientist, Dr. Richard Haynes, and we will be talking with some other special guests about the importance of aviation safety along with Dr. Haynes. Dr. Haynes, you are an expert in the human visual field and visual acuity. Do you feel that it is possible that these objects are oftentimes moving so quickly that we can't perceive them with the human eye?
I think we're talking about far beyond inertial speeds that the eye could not track. You know, pretty much science has pretty much measured how fast a human being can visually follow a moving object. And so we pretty much know what those numbers are. And if something is moving at faster than that, then just by definition, the eye can't follow it, and it would be invisible. It would not exist, so to speak.
There is a case that you worked on and your team at NARCAP, and it was back in 2010, November 5th to be exact, and it was the El Bosque Air Force Base in the southwest suburbs of Santiago, Chile. Speaking of objects moving too quickly to be picked up by the human visual field, this is a prime example of that. Could you give us a little more information on that case?
Okay. Yes, that was really a very interesting video that I received from General Bermudez in Santiago, Chile, who is the director of CIFE there, which is one of the major government-sponsored organizations in the world that research this subject. Well, he's asked for me to take a look at this video and see what I could find and to write a report, which I did. That report is on our website, www.narcap.org, in the technical reports section. At any rate, an air show was going on in Santiago, south of Santiago a little bit, not very far, to commemorate the a general was leaving, an Air Force general was leaving his position at the air base, and a new one was coming on, and so they had an air show in their honor. And so there were a number of people on the ground with video cameras capturing the flyover of these different formations of planes. And lo and behold, when you do careful analysis, frame by frame, of quite a number of these minutes of video, I discovered, and Bruce Maccabee also, and several others, a small, at least one, sometimes more than one, spherical, rather fast in angular speed, objects that were flying in this same airspace as the airplanes. And I think there, as I recall, there were like 10 different formations flying over sequentially over the airfield, the runway. Well, so I wrote this up and tried to document it as thoroughly as I could. One of the important things was that the skeptics said that that object that was captured on the video was at least one or more insects. That's a very fine working hypothesis, but then it deserves study and evaluation.
Right.
So, I was able to find 2 video camera images, which I received from CIFE, of the same formation flying over, from slightly different locations on the ground, roughly 30, 40 feet apart, which was quite clear, which both captured the small UAP. And because of, various research, let's call it, I had convinced myself that, in fact, it was not a bug, and in fact, it was something at a much greater distance than a bug would be. A very small bug would be very small on a video, of course, and would probably be invisible at the distances this object was. And so at least I convinced myself that there's pretty good evidence that this was not a bug, which then leaves the major question, what was it? And frankly, I don't know. It was not recorded on radar, ground radar. It was not seen by any of the pilots, and CIFE interviewed those pilots on my behalf. Anyway, it was an interesting case. It's just one of quite a number that involves small spherical objects that are flying in the same airspace as airplanes.
This case was a huge case, and it caused quite a controversy in the field of UAP research. Most notably, when Maccabee concluded that these objects were in fact not anomalies, but he believed them to be bugs. Leslie Kean wrote a really great article, two of them actually, about all of this investigation and the different conclusions that were found. And a quote from her article from the Huffington Post from Maccabee states, "Without further information that would show the objects were distant and hence large, it must be considered most likely that the objects were small and nearby, such as insects." In a recent email, he explained that since I could not accomplish a triangulation of the objects I analyzed, I have to accept the scientifically conservative conclusion that the objects I studied could have been small and nearby. In a later portion of Kean's article, she has a section about Haynes and his approach. I will read it as follows. Haynes takes a different approach as shown in his 108-page report titled The El Bosque Video Case, a Preliminary Study of Anomalous Objects in Active Airspace. His analysis consisted of plotting trajectories as of many different UAP as he could find, as well as enlarging and enhancing the UAP images from selected frames. That at least one of these UAP was not a flying insect near the cameras is supported by the analysis of video images of the same UAP recorded by two separate cameras, he writes. In a further portion of the article, Haynes states that NARCAP's interest in the case lay mainly in aviation safety, and it is for this reason that he conducted the study. He also suggests the UAP could have presented a risk to flight operations, but acknowledges that without knowing for sure whether they possessed finite mass, it is not possible to say. Now we're going to talk about my favorite subject, spheres. NARCAP produced a very important technical report that I refer to frequently for my research. Spherical UAP and Aviation Safety, a Critical Review, is available at narcap.org. The work done by the NARCAP team of specialists is incredible, and they cover such things as the physical characteristics and hypotheses, aerodynamics, radar detection of spherical targets, and much more. Now I'm going to read to you the first paragraph on Project Sphere, written by Dr. Haynes. Flight safety within the National Aerospace System, NAS, of the United States of America remains of critical importance to everyone who is associated in any way with aviation. Other nations share similar concerns as well. Safety impacts many aspects of the long-term viability of aviation that is a key transportation system of all modern nations, so that anything that can be shown to potentially impact flight safety of any kind of airplane, private, military, test, or commercial, should be of genuine interest to aviation officials around the world. This report addresses one particular subject that, as far as can be determined from the open literature, has been overlooked by aviation officials at all levels, viz. generally small, energetic, propelled, i.e. not passive, spherical phenomena and or objects that have been reported for decades within the NAS and elsewhere around the world. Whether or not these strange and diverse objects pose a threat to safety remains to be seen. Nevertheless, the fact that so many have been reported by pilots and credible witnesses on the ground, flying very near airplanes, and numerous Air Force interceptors have been seen chasing them, calls for a more critical analysis. Here we will simply call them unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAP for short. Project Sphere continues here with spherical UAP, where Dr. Richard Haynes writes, the author has collected a large number of pilot narratives that describe one or more spherically shaped objects, or lights at night, that approach their airplanes from a distance, take up station nearby, often decelerating rapidly to match exactly their own airspeed. sometimes fly across to the opposite side of the airplane or spiral around the airplane several times and eventually fly away into the distance, or they may suddenly disappear. Now, if such narratives are to be taken seriously, which they must be if only for the sake of acknowledging the credibility and general reliability of the pilot witnesses, if not for the sake of aviation safety, we must take a careful look at what we know about spheres in general. An account to illustrate such an example. This was written again by Dr. Haynes as he was a passenger on a NASA airplane en route from Moffett Field, California to Houston, Texas. This took place back in the 1980s. This is a quote from the pilot. I was piloting a brand new B-52 right off the assembly line in Wichita, Kansas, and had a full crew on board, but we had no operational radar or guns. They were going to be installed later. We were headed for an airbase in the southwestern part of the country. The sky was completely clear, and the sun was high overhead when the event happened. We were at our assigned cruise altitude, and I don't remember now. I had engaged the autopilot and maintained our airspeed and altitude and heading. Suddenly I noticed a bright flash of sunlight far over my left side. I turned to see what it was. I was surprised to see a spherical object that looked metallic like polished chrome. It took up a position some distance near my left wing and kept pace with us. It was perhaps from 4 to 8 feet in diameter and had no seams, rivets, insignias, or other markings that I could see. As I was just about to yell for my first officer to come over and look at anything, he said from his right seat, something like, "Commander, there's a round metallic ball flying over us, our right wing." He went on to describe to me an identically shaped and sized object that seemed fixed in a position with us. We must have been flying at about 300 to 350 knots or so at the time. Well, to make a long story shorter, the crewman in the tail who normally operate our tail guns called on the intercom and announced that there was a shiny, round, metal ball following very close right behind our airplane. The top gunner and the bottom gunner also called in to say that there were 2 more objects of the same shape keeping exact pace with the airplane, one directly above, the other one below us. These 3 objects had the same appearance as the 2 we had off our wingtips. Well, what do? I don't know what they were, so I went into a standard evasive flight maneuver. First, I disconnected the autopilot and then put the plane into dive and changed our heading to see if we could lose the objects. After about 10 or 15 minutes of doing this, it was clear that we couldn't shake them. They maintained their position relative to the huge jet exactly no matter what I did. So they certainly weren't reflections of sunlight or weather balloons or birds. I finally decided to climb back up to our assigned cruise altitude and heading and turned the autopilot back on again. Then, after a few more minutes, the 5 spheres left us, apparently in exact opposite order in which they arrived. This confirmed by the other crew member on board. The object was under our belly, apparently, was the first to leave. It dropped down some distance and then accelerated upward in a steep climb. It was on our own flight heading. We both saw it pass by our nose. The object that was flying above us took off next. It simply took off in the same direction as the first high acceleration, and we also saw it disappear into the sky. This highlights the gravity of this type of event and the impact it has on aviation safety. Project Sphere delves into this in-depthly, and I would like to know more from you, Dr. Haynes, about NARCAP's Project Sphere.
First of all, what is Project Sphere? It's an ongoing NARCAP effort to understand as much as we can about the aerodynamics, the visual characteristics, the flight control of spherical objects. Without any visible means of propulsion or navigation or guidance, and yet we're finding an increasing number of well-documented reports by highly competent observers of spheres that can pace an airplane at cruise altitude and cruise speed and follow the airplane when it changes direction and so forth. So Project Sphere, I think, is kind of a fundamental area that has been overlooked. And so several years ago now, I enlisted the assistance of a number of our technical specialists within NARCAP, each coming from a different background, basically, technical background, and asked them to write up basically chapters or sections that would explore spheres from their own points of view. And so if our listeners are interested, that report is on our NARCAP website, and you'll find probably more than you ever wanted to know about spheres and the very odd characteristic that they have lift on the top half and they have lift on the bottom half, and so that balances out as long as they're perfect spheres and solid, rigid objects, such that they should stay in straight and level flight, except for one thing, and that is gravity. And so you should eventually see these spheres, who are assuming they're flying passively, without any forward propulsion, you'd expect these spheres to gradually follow a parabola down steeper and steeper until they collide with the Earth. Well, there are many very interesting, fascinating reports where that doesn't happen. And in fact, the objects climb against gravity. They turn corners, and sometimes very rapidly. They decelerate and stop and hover. They just do things that spheres can't do. And so that's kind of a long-winded explanation or description of our Project Sphere.
I always think of Dr. Richard Haines and Ted Rowe because, as well as the other members of the organization. But as you know, the primary focus has always been on aviation safety and its relationship to anomalous phenomena. And as a result, NARCAP was formed, National Aviation Center for Anomalous Phenomena, and it was put together by the co-founders, by Dr. Richard Haines and Ted Rowe. And with that, I always had an interest in that, Erica, because the fact that so many sightings are reported by pilots, as you are aware of, not just here in the United States, but throughout the country, throughout the world, actually.
Tell me your thoughts about the caliber of people that are involved with NARCAP.
Well, it attracts a high caliber of people. Many of them are scientists or specialists in their own field of research, many of them that are connected to the aviation community. It also allows people or that do work in the aviation community that may have problems somewhat relating to a lot of the fringe elements out there, as you know, in the UFO community. And so, but when you start seeing very credible names like Dr. Richard Haines and a number of other people that have worked for NASA or other agencies within our government or elsewhere, it shows this is serious. This is a serious subject matter, because these particular objects that are reported may affect the instrument panels, the instrumentation on the plane. Because many of them are now digitalized, and computers are operating these planes. And man, if something was to knock that out, it really puts the entire air crew as well as the passengers at risk. Yes, I just wanted to share with you, I had the pleasure of joining Dr. Richard Haines and Ted Rowe on a trip down to Mexico back in 2004. And it was fascinating because we were able to meet with a number of people from the Mexican aviation community, pilots, air traffic controllers, people that had actual encounters while flying up in the air. And that was just it gave me a perspective of, I said, heck, if it's happening here in Mexico, obviously it's happening in other parts of the world, which we do get reports from our specialists that are connected with the international community. And yes, and it's our FAA and other organizations that are equivalent to that. I mean, the goal is to educate them, but also to develop a cooperation. And it's getting them to accept a very controversial subject matter out there that's been around for eons of time. I mean, as you know, this thing goes back historically, but I've been so impressed with the people's caliber of experience, such as Dr. Richard Haynes.
Well, we love to hear from other people with regard to this, and I have a trusted group such as Ruben Uriarte, NARCAP's Executive Director Ted Rowe, Dr. Richard Haynes, and also James Clarkson, who is the MUFON State Director in Washington, and all of what they say is very important to me. In the later segment, coming up here pretty quickly, we're going to be talking with James Clarkson about aviation safety, as well as giving you more of this great interview with a legend, Dr. Richard Haynes. This is Erica Lukes. It is Fantopia Friday, and we will be right back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, please visit the UFO Classified show page at kcorradio.com. UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, Erica Lukes, and you are listening to UFO Classified. Thanks to all my friends in the chat room and from all over the world for taking your Friday night to join me. I have had the pleasure of interviewing some amazing people tonight, one of whom is Dr. Richard Haynes. There'll be more with him in the next segment. Now I'm going to bring on a fellow colleague and someone I respect, Mr. James Clarkson, who is the State Director in Washington for MUFON. James has worked alongside some of the best. Two of those people are Peter Davenport with NUFORC and William Puckett with UFOs Northwest. Some of you listening tonight will think about William Puckett and then remember our American Airlines case, the case that I investigated with my assistant State Director Jeff Cox. The American airline pilot was flying over Nephi, Utah from San Francisco to Philadelphia when he, by the witness accounts, observed a large orange square that was keeping pace with the plane. We later, with William Puckett's help, obtained radar data, and that radar data was pretty impressive. So we have gone through the painstaking process of ruling out anomalous phenomena, and through this process, William Puckett, who contributes to the NARCAP website, has kept in contact with Dr. Richard Haynes. And Dr. Richard Haynes has told Bill that this is really an anomalous case. So we are grateful for that, and that just lends more validity to our case. James, I want to talk to you about the importance of NARCAP and then talk a little bit about pilots and some of the scrutiny they face and perhaps what we can do to change they play.
Well, when you're trying to get a handle on the entire UFO phenomena, what you're really looking for is what I call UFO gold, which is a simple equation where you combine high strangeness with high witness credibility. And it becomes quickly very obvious when you start interviewing many witnesses that the people you would really prefer to interview are professionals. And out of that category, I can't think of a group that would be more qualified to assess unusual aerial phenomena than pilots, followed closely by police officers, military personnel, and other people in those particular professions. And then to back that up, one of the big issues where the accomplishments of Richard Haynes are so important is the fact that pilots and other professional groups, as I mentioned, oftentimes are taking a great personal risk to make a UFO report. So if you're going to get them to come out of hiding and tell you what they've experienced, you had better have an organization put together where you can ensure confidentiality and where a reputation is developed so that these very important witnesses will feel safe in making a report. And I think that the work of Richard Haynes has done that over now, I guess, probably at least 3 decades that I'm aware of.
And you make such a great point that the most important thing, as we both know, is keeping a witness safe. Especially, when you take the Japan Airlines case where you had a pilot coming forward, and after he comes forward with this encounter, he loses his job. And Dr. Haynes was instrumental in telling that the commercial airline company that he had done an excellent job, and that was the kind of pilot that we needed. And as a result, Captain Terryuchi got his job back. So that's big.
That's huge. I wasn't even aware of that aspect of that extremely important case. In fact, that case is the one that got me off the sidelines back in 1986.
Oh, that's incredible.
Yeah, I heard that on the news, and I knew that case was extremely significant because we had an airline pilot and his crew coming forward. And then, as I recall, this was another one of those federal agency tap dances, because the FAA initially confirmed that they had radar confirmation on the sighting, and then after they began to assess the public impact of their announcement, they retreated and said, oh no, they had misspoke themselves and it really wasn't on the radar. And of course, as we now know years later, now that the witnesses who were actually in the radar control room have retired, that in point of fact, there was something there that gave a radar return in conjunction with Captain Terryuchi's report.
Yes, I mean, it's an incredible, I think it's one of the most important cases that we have seen. And that's just one of it really emphasizes the scrutiny and ridicule people are under for coming forward with this. And that shouldn't be the case. I mean, they are taking hundreds of people's lives in their hands, and they have to feel safe and feel like they can go to different agencies or their companies and report things that are true.
Exactly. And one of the things that's really interesting to me is that apparently the United Kingdom has taken a totally different approach to the question of pilots reporting UFOs. And my understanding is that by regulation, they are required to report them, and therefore there is no stigma attached to complying with governmental regulations for a pilot.
That's incredible. And that's I would hope that at some point in time we would do the same in the United States. I don't know what the holdup is there. I know there's a lot of red tape to work through. I have an acquaintance that I spoke with who is a commercial pilot here, and he said, if he were to have a UFO reporting, that there's so much paperwork that he just simply wouldn't report it.
Well, I think it goes deeper than that. I think there is we've sort of, I guess, washed the baby out with the bathwater, because we are so overwhelmed by the money-making aspects of airline companies. They control the policy, and obviously they're going to err on the side of extreme caution. They don't want to have pilots working for them who see little green men or who might wear tinfoil hats, and therefore they're going to just deny everything and obviously make the problem go away. And I believe the primary example of that was the famous sighting at the Chicago airport. And I'm trying to remember which year that was. It was early in the 2000s. It was a broad daylight
Yes, the
sighting.
O'Hare case. And in
the O'Hare
fact,
case.
NARCAP worked on that as well.
Yes, exactly. And the witnesses were all scared to death to talk because of their fear of losing their jobs. And here we have an event that, we should have been immediately encouraging the people to come forward. There should have been no stigma involved in reporting something extremely important. And in fact, I have direct knowledge of an incident down in Dallas that involved a international airline pilot who's a good friend of mine, who will not identify himself for all the same reasons that we're discussing. And they observed a craft that was oval-shaped, glowing orange, in an area between the runways. And this is while he and his crew, with a full load of passengers, are waiting their turn to take off. And they make this UFO observation, and there's a huge debate going on in the cockpit. Do we report it or don't we report it? And they finally decided they weren't going to report it, even though they're looking at an object that is in absolutely restricted airspace. There's not supposed to be anything flying there because it's so dangerous.
And that just leaves me, that just gives me the chills. The fact that you're experiencing this, they're passengers, and they feel so ridiculed that they can't come forward. That has got to stop. And
well, sure.
I think of a case here, too, that I was told about, very similar, at the Salt Lake International Airport, where there was a large orange sphere that was right off the tip of a wing, and the pilots, they aborted the takeoff, from what I have been told. I don't have anything to substantiate that, but again, that goes back to the case that you were just talking about, where these pilots aren't reporting it, and where it does impact the safety of these passengers.
Well, they're gambling, basically. In other words, he was about to reach for the friend of mine was about to reach for the microphone to make the report, and his crew in the cockpit said, "Don't do it." And they finally decided to just sort of tough it out and see what happens. And they watched this object appeared to be dropping balls of energy that disappeared into the air, which I have some experience with cases like that. In fact, we got one of them on videotape over in Spokane a couple of years ago. And the rest of the incident was that eventually the object just flat out disappeared while they were waiting to take off. Well, of course, if you think this through, the pilot and the crew decide not to report it. And as soon as the plane lands, however many passengers who saw that object, they all went their separate ways. And of course, how many people are actually paying attention, looking out the windows anymore when an aircraft takes off? They're all, trying to figure out how quickly they can get back on their cell phones or their tablets.
You're not kidding about that. I mean, it's amazing. I just recently got back from the UK, and I, of course, love the window seat because it's just beautiful to look out. And I was shocked to see, even though it was a long flight, how many people just put their shades on. They don't want to look out. You know, the blinds are closed, and we really have an environment of people that don't engage. They don't look up. They don't pay attention to their surroundings. And if we don't become active participants in our world, then we won't see what's going on around us and make a change to benefit pilots and police officers and people that are protecting us.
Well, that's for sure. The other thing is about this friend of mine, he's obviously has a very open mind towards such things, but he told me that there are very few pilots who like to do what he does, which when he's on long international flights, he turns the lights way down in the cabin, in the cockpit, so that he can look out at the stars. Because as he's pointed out to me, when you're flying at that altitude and you're way far away from land where there's no ambient light, he said it's amazing what you can see. And so he's constantly looking, you know, trying to see if there's a possibility that he might see something else. And he has seen some very strange lights in the distance that have moved in odd ways. But, you know, it's all a matter of attitude. He said so many other pilots leave the lights turned way up and all they want to do is read, because so much of flying now has become automated. In fact, obviously, I think the airlines, if they had their way, would eliminate the pilots altogether.
And that's, I think, the way the world is going. It's just automate everything, and you lose the personal touch, and people lose jobs. It's an interesting thing, but I definitely think that we need to do what we can, and I support NARCAP wholeheartedly, as I know you do, because of their groundbreaking work, not just in aviation, but to me, as I've mentioned earlier on the show, Project Sphere is something that I will go back to time and time again, because so many of our reports as investigators are dealing with these spherical fireball type objects.
Oh, I agree. In fact, the person that I discuss this with most often is Peter Davenport. He gets lots of reports of very alarming activity by glowing spheres at many different places. In fact, he sent me one just very recently describing Easley County, South Carolina. We have a sighting from just on the 7th of an extremely bright orange sphere, so bright that it was hard to look at, that moved across the sky, according to the witnesses, faster than the speed of sound. So I don't know what you make of that, but it obviously is very odd. And he is documenting these types of craft routinely. I also would point out that one of the things that comes up over and over again on the NARCAP website are unexplained close encounters between commercial aircraft and other unidentified aircraft. And that's probably one of the main areas where NARCAP has done more to get those stories out and bring them together, because that obviously is a direct and dire threat to aviation safety.
It is, and I know that in previous interviews I've heard with Dr. Haynes, he has said that he had felt that that these objects are repeatedly seen almost, in a curious nature, looking at these aircraft, but then have there been instances that we don't know about where planes have actually crashed as a result of their interactions with these? We just don't know. That's true. But it's an interesting thing, and I know that you, out of anybody that I know, understands the gravity of the situation and the importance of the work of Dr. Haynes and Ted Rowe and many others at NARCAP.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me. You are such a love. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Erica.
Okay, well, you stay out of trouble, and let's talk soon.
All right.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Wow, this is such a great night. I've had amazing people on here already, and I'm really looking forward to playing the fourth and final interview, the segment with Dr. Richard Haynes when we get back. Again, I want you to find me on Facebook, like UFO Classified, spread the word. We need to get the word out. And then please share this interview so people will understand the importance of an organization like NARCAP. We will see you on the other side of the break.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio Contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back, everybody, to Fantopia Friday, right here on KCOR Digital Broadcasting Network. As you know, it is Ladies' Night, and so you can stick around and listen to Joanna Roth on Universal Child, my fabulous producer, Tina Marie on Restricted Airspace, and Solaris Blue Raven on Hyperspace tonight. Make sure you visit my website, UFOclassified.com, and like UFO Classified on Facebook. Please share the information. Get the word out about this radio show, and please give me suggestions about future guests to bring on. I appreciate all of you taking your Friday night to be with me and to listen to the show that I'm presenting. It means a lot to me. As I mentioned before, next week I will be with my friend and colleague Robert Spearing. We will be talking more about recent cases with regard to the orange orb fireball phenomena. I did speak with Peter Davenport today, who informed me that there are some very interesting cases with regard to that, and I will keep you informed, as well as Robert Spearing. So look for that show, tell everyone about it. But now for our final segment with Dr. Haynes, the chief scientist of NARCAP. Dr. Haynes, tell us a little bit more about TED, about NARCAP, about how to change opinions in the field, all of that good stuff. I know that NARCAP needs funding, like any good research organization, and I want to say that the caliber of people, the researchers involved with NARCAP, is the best of the best. You will not find more qualified people in the international research community. So you are, as you know, you have a great team around you.
Well, I agree with you. We would like to see more involvement by really technical people who would like to contribute and contribute their talents, basically, their intellect. That's as important as money is, of course. I mean, we have practical needs, but we also have intellectual needs that really need to be mined. This is a mining operation here. Let me comment one more thing about NARCAP, if I may.
Yes.
And it is that Ted and I, way back, came to the understanding that ufology, as it was back then, was pretty much involuted. It was serving itself. It was entertaining. It did make reports and did hold conferences and so forth. But we said we've got to help turn the corner on this and make the study of this phenomenon of practical relevance to society. And so we came up with this basic focus on aviation safety. And so ever since then, we have stayed the course in the sense of not deviating and not using the term UFO, but trying to find reliable linkages or evidence between flight safety and the nearby presence of one or more UAP. And much to my surprise, we found a lot of them. And in fact, we continue to find them. And so we're trying to urge organizations around the country and around the world to do the same thing we did, and to turn this corner and to find an aspect of ufology that has relevance to the American public, to the world public. In our case, we chose aviation safety because everybody flies. Mm-hmm. Safety is important, you know. And so if we can make a contribution to make flying safer, we will have achieved our objectives.
And not only that, but since this is something that you have to take seriously. I mean, to me, when you're impacting hundreds of people on a plane, or you are flying over nuclear installations and threatening, this is something that we have to take with utmost urgency and seriousness. And I think that you and Ted doing this has been very, very important. And I admire both of you for staying the course. And when I look at the work that you've done, in fact, Ted has told me when I was speaking with him, he has mentioned the time that you went to brief Podesta and how UAP, that terminology came about. And this is a really interesting story. I would love it if you could just briefly tell us about all of that.
Well, there's not really that much to tell. I was invited to go back to Washington and to give a briefing, along with several other people, by the way, to some pretty high-level, let's say, government workers. I'll just leave it at that. And during my presentation, I consistently used the term UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, while the other folks at this meeting continued to use UFO. And I didn't even have to define UAP. It was quite clear from my talk and my coverage of the subject what I was talking about. And so the idea or the term, I guess, must have caught on. It just makes sense. The term UFO is so pejorative. It just begs the question. It's a leading, it's okay from the old days, but the time has come to move on. Unidentified flying objects. Well, we don't know they're objects. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Sometimes they act like plasma. That's not an object. Certainly unidentified. And the term flying, oftentimes they're not flying. They're sitting on the ground or whatever. They're hovering. That's not flying. And so we deliberately, selected UAP as a better general term, and we've been sticking with it ever since. Another point is that if we, NARCAP, had continued to use UFO, it would have biased, I think, many of the aviation officials that we need to interact with in our work on aviation safety, and would have destroyed, to some extent, our credibility. But by using this new term, we're more accepted. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And I think that, unfortunately, when you use the word UFO, it does bring up a lot of negative ideas in people's minds. And it's just from all of the negative the jokes that have been made over the decades, whether intentional, deliberately done to sabotage the effort or whatever. But I think it is very important, if we want people to take this seriously, to reframe to use new terminology. I think it's wonderful. And I have to say that when I heard Hillary Clinton use the term UAP, I just smiled, and I thought of you. That's wonderful. I mean, it really, really is. And these are the great contributions that many people don't know about you, that you have made, that it's really important. But, I want to go back a little bit to the spheres, because when I'm doing research, when I was state director for MUFON, to me, the biggest type of sighting that we have in our database, they're spheres. And a majority of those are the orange amber fireballs. And it was interesting for me to see that many state directors or field investigators were dismissing these cases as Chinese lanterns, or, they would say things, they're just the lights in the sky, and we want a real case. And to me, that was so almost alarming, because the lights in the sky, or, some of these things that are clearly moving against the wind, that are clearly behaving in ways that a Chinese lantern would say to me that there's something important here that we need to pay attention to and to study. So what would you do to change the sentiment with regard to that?
And by that, you mean the sentiment of those who say it's not worthy of study?
Yes.
That's the question?
Yes.
I don't think you're going to change them. I don't think that you're going to re-educate them. They're just living with a bias that they have to live with, and so do we. We just have to go on and do our work and do it the best we can. There are skeptics in every field, and if we allowed the skeptic in our own field to discourage us, we might as well give up. So it kind of takes a thick skin, I think, and a little bit of compulsion to continue on in what you are motivated to do it well. And don't think that you know it all or I know it all. It's a team effort, and that after I pass away, people will come along and stand on my shoulders, so to speak, and then when they pass away, people will come along in the next generation and stand on theirs. That's how science progresses, you see. Mm-hmm. So I would hope that this study of UAP would in fact follow the scientific procedure. It is a social phenomenon, but it's also, in addition to that, a valid scientific phenomenon that deserves study. And as you and I both know, that hasn't been happening by and large. The academia has not touched it. As far as I can tell, I've not read hardly any published papers other than PhD dissertations on the subject, but not journal articles. There's no funding or grant money from the federal government that I know of for this subject. And so we've got to do the best job we can as individuals to try to raise the quality level, to speak out, not be ashamed of it. It's nothing to be ashamed of. To just be proud of what we're doing and continue.
And that's exactly it. And I was thinking before our interview tonight how courageous you were to have talked about this, and to have known the importance of your work, and to just you were so steadfast through the decades. And was there ever a time in your life where you felt like, I'm going to get out of this, I can't do this anymore?
No, I don't think so. I've kind of a adventurous spirit, I think, and so I look for the surprises that are certainly all around us, and in this field particularly, there are always surprises. When I got started, the most common shape reported from around the world was a saucer, and usually a saucer with a dome on the top. Well, as you and I both know, that's changed.
Yes.
For some reason, I'm now surprised to have to say that we're dealing with spheres, okay? And that shape might change someday, maybe soon. And what do these shape changes portend? What do they tell us, you see? Nothing's written in concrete here. And so would you look for surprises and enjoy the trip?
Well, I know that I'm enjoying it. It's every day I just wake up and I'm so excited to talk to different people and to learn. And I'm not only learning about UAP, but I'm learning about the natural world and the astronomy and it's science. And so to me, it's been an absolute joy.
Good. That's great.
Yes, it is. And I absolutely, I'm just thrilled. But I want to, since I am so passionate about researching, these spherical objects, what do you think, with your decades of studying them, what do you think some of the commonalities are? I heard you mention in an interview that you see that the data shows us that these are the same things that are seen worldwide.
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Could you repeat it?
Yes. So what are some of the commonalities with regard to the sphere phenomena?
Okay. That's a good question. I think that one of the more general characteristics is what I would call curiosity. That they seem to evidence a curiosity about what we're doing. For instance, if you have a commercial airplane with lots of passengers on board flying somewhere, let's say across America, and one or more of these spheres approaches that airplane, the sphere slows down to the speed of the airplane. It assumes a station or a position relative to the airplane for some time usually, and it might hop over to the other wingtip or stay above it for a while, and then it goes away. Okay, usually vertically, but not always. Well, one might characterize that behavior or motion of the sphere as showing curiosity about the airplane. Now, that's just one possibility, but to me, it's a reasonable possibility. So that's one generality which seems to be falling out, found rather frequently in my research. I think another generality is that they don't have contrails. That by and large, whatever they are and whatever propels them does not produce a vapor trail or smoke or sparks or something behind them in the direction from which they've come. Well, that's important too, obviously. It raises some fundamental questions about what the propulsion mechanism is. And is there atmospheric ionization or not, particularly after dark, where you should be able to perhaps see some of this ionization process going on. I think another generality I would say is that in the limited number of cases we have where a sphere has passed across the nose of an airplane in flight, there has not been turbulence, air turbulence. Okay.
Oh, that is interesting.
Well, it is. That's right. Because if the phenomenon has mass and some reasonable cross-sectional area, size in other words, diameter, one would expect just from normal atmospheric physics to have a turbulence set up that might be experienced by the airplane as it passes through that trail, that whatever is behind the sphere. I think another generality is that when they depart, they very, very often depart vertically or at a steep angle upwards. We don't know why, but that happens a whole lot. Very interesting because it's defying gravity, of course. Of course, there's more wiggle room going up than down, too. If you go down, then you have the Earth down there that's going to perhaps limit your travel, your escape. I think one more generality is that in the great majority of the cases I've looked at, they're passive reflectors. They're not active emitters in the sense of giving off their own light. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes they do, but I'd say the majority don't and might be described as polished ball bearings. In other words, chrome-plated solid steel, spheres. Does that make sense?
Yes, it absolutely does.
But that's a great question, and I'll have to think about that some more.
Yeah, that is for me with my research, I believe that there are specific locations where you see, they're sightings clusters, and so I'm trying to work on that and figure out what are the common threads. Why is there a mineral or rare earth content that they're attracted to? It's just been a fascinating process. But did you find when you get the pilot reports that there are specific locations where these things occur?
No, I don't think so. That's a very difficult question to answer. I wish we could, because the geological characteristics, the magnetic fields of the Earth and so forth, that would be kind of a logical explanation or linking to the phenomenon. But most airplanes, I would say this in general, that at least in commercial flights, most sightings of these anomalies occur at cruise altitude, which is pretty high up, right? And so the airplane might be over the center of Iowa or Nebraska or somewhere, but you draw a cone down to the ground from the airplane, and it can cover a huge amount of area down there,
right?
In which you might find earthquake fault lines and, uranium concentrations and whatever, all kinds of things.
So do you, with regard to the fault lines and the earthquake lights, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't have any yet. It's just a working hypothesis. I did write a book, came out a couple of years ago, called Sudden Loss. It's a fictional story of a major earthquake that takes place here in the Puget Sound area of Seattle. Cataclysmic size. And in that book, it's a fictional account, but it's fiction only because it hasn't happened yet, because the geologists are telling us that it's going to, that we're due for a big one up here where I live. And so the book explores, I have my own hypothesis on what triggered the big one, but who knows if that's correct. But it explores the aftermath of that big earthquake tremor through the eyes of 5 people who are basically neighbors up here where I live on an island. And then the breakdown in society, the breakdown in the food supply, the gasoline supply, the whatever, medical supplies, and how people cope with it. And I wrote the book primarily as an encouragement for readers to get prepared ahead of time, to put some food away, to put some water away, and just be generally prepared if they could.
And I would love to, and could I find a copy of that, and where would I find it?
Well, Amazon.com.
Okay. I might have to send it to you, though, to get an autograph.
Okay. Well, for you.
Oh, you're so nice. Thank you. That would be wonderful. But I have, I live in, obviously, in a very active fault. I live right on the fault line, the Wasatch Fault Line. And so for me, I've been thinking a lot about earthquake preparedness lately. So this to me is a sign that I better go get my food storage started.
I wouldn't put it off, very frankly. It's just a smart thing to do. It's like paying an insurance premium, You hope you never need it, but you're sure glad it's there when you do need it.
Absolutely. Oh, I look forward to reading that. It's wonderful. And what are your, just in closing, and you've been so wonderful and gracious, but what are your thoughts on where we could go with research, and what can you tell a younger generation to do?
You mean to
as far as how should we proceed with this? I believe that we have enough data, that we should be analyzing that data and really getting out there and figuring out where these active locations are, and then conducting field research studies. And I think that's, from my perspective, something that I want to try to encourage people to do. And then from an aviation perspective, how do we encourage a younger generation to get involved with this and to carry what you and your executive director, Ted Rowe, have done forward?
Okay. Yeah, well, that's a good question. Well, Erica, each person has to be motivated on their own, of course. I don't think we can encourage people to get interested in something, but it's got to be internally motivated or they won't stick with it. Or if they do stick with it, it might not be very high quality. So I think that we need to make the field of UAP research as inviting and fun and creative as we possibly can, to bring in, to motivate younger people predominantly who would like to contribute and make a difference, leave a mark, if you will. I think everybody likes to do that, or would like to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it's not like recruiting for a job, because it's a lifetime hobby. It's a pastime. They're not going to earn much money, which makes it even more difficult to find willing workers because they've got to support themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it has to remain a hobby for a while until our science community wakes up and begins to admit that there's something really important going on here that deserves funding, government funding perhaps, perhaps industrial, or I should say corporate funding, to make this an effort where people can contribute and earn a living at the same time. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And do you think that is starting to happen?
I haven't seen it. No. I think that our culture right now is so, let's say, preoccupied by so many other concerns that UAP are way, way down the list.
And to me, as somebody who's so passionate about this, I don't get that because this is something that has so many implications. And I mean, this will absolutely change the world. And from my perspective, I feel that it's essential that we encourage people to stop saying that this is a belief system. This is fact. We have enough data. We have enough factual information to say that there is something interacting with us.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think there's no doubt ever since even 1969, when Blue Book shut down, there was plenty of evidence there to come to that conclusion. But what science really needs is fairly current, calibrated, quantified data that they can have confidence in to draw conclusions about these working hypotheses, and not to jump to conclusions, not to say, gee, these are little green men from outer space, but to be objective again and neutral and just let the data speak for itself. That would be, I guess, my general mode of operating.
And that is true. I think that you can definitely you can go down a lot of rabbit holes. And I think it is important not to jump to conclusions. And it's been interesting to me to look at some of the really brilliant researchers that have shied away from ufology, that have, like Dr. Jacques Vallée. I mean, I believe that the sentiment there is that we don't really know what it is that we're dealing with. Is it extraterrestrial, interdimensional, terrestrial? We don't have a concept. We don't have a clue. And that's why it is so important to acquire funding and to stress the importance of this work. And in my opinion, and you probably feel the same way, I don't think this is something that we can wait around for. We need to really mobilize the troops and get this done.
Yeah, I agree with that too, and I know that NARCAP would greatly appreciate any financial assistance people can give, with the hope of saving lives, making flying safer, in other words, but also at the same time collecting high quality data that we can learn a whole lot more about the phenomenon. So we really do have two objectives: flight safety and learning more about the phenomenon through good quality data.
And I thank you for that, because to me, as a researcher and somebody wanting to do good work, I mean, NARCAP that was a place that a site, an organization that I quickly gravitated towards because I understood the importance of what you had done and the fact that you were very transparent about publishing this and sharing this information with the public. And I think that's key. And some other research organizations don't necessarily, they're not transparent in sharing this with the public, which I think needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Yeah, we appreciate those comments.
Well, I have a feeling you're going to get some donations.
Oh, well, we hope so.
And oh, absolutely! I just think it's such a pleasure and an honor to speak with you, and I've been so excited to have you here. And I hope that I wanted to tell you that I posted something on social media about our interview that would be airing, and I had comments from James Clarkson and Ruben Uriarte and so many people that I hold in high esteem as well that said, my gosh, he is such a wonderful man who has done such great work. And so one thing that I want you to know is that you have inspired many, many people. Even if you don't know that we're all out here, I want you to know that, because it's important. And I believe that your work it will forever impact what we do.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, Erica, and I will someday be able to say the same thing for you.
Well, I hope so. And I think with all of the help that I get from people like you, I hope that is the case. So I can't thank you enough for sharing your time with me, and I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. Remember to spread the word. Remember to go to NARCAP, and if you can contribute to their research, that is fantastic. Look at the technical reports, and remember that our pilots, our police officers, all of these people who keep our safety at the forefront of their mind have many, many stresses to deal with, and we hope at some point in time that the FAA and other organizations will come forward and support people instead of ridiculing them with regard to something that is very, very real. I hope you have a safe and fabulous weekend. I will see you next Friday on UFO Classified. Good night.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows, please visit the UFO Classified show page at kcorradio.com. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. UFO Classified. This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51. Wait, that doesn't exist. This is the KCOR